Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Voices of Recovery. I'm your host, Michele Eich, and this is my book, How to Kill an Addiction Recovery with God. In this book, I talk about having a relationship with God and how it helps us break free from whatever is binding us. And I also have 20 incredible testimonies of real people who have overcome with God's help. So I'd love it if you'd check it out. But every week I do interview somebody who has overcome a life-controlling issue with God's help. And this week, my guest is Daphne. Daphne, welcome to Voices of Recovery.
Thank you, Michele. It is great to be here. I'm excited to meet your people.
Yes, absolutely. So you and I connected a few years ago through an author program that we were both members of. We both published books, and I've met you at conferences and things like that. So I'm super excited to have you as a guest today.
Thank you. I consider it an honor. I really do.
Awesome. Well, could you just take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Sure. Thank you. I'm Daphne Smith, as Michele said. A lot of people also know me as Daphne V, which V happens to be my maiden initial. It also stands for victorious, which is the way I approach life and what I refer to as my secret name.
I love that. I love that. And just this morning, I was referencing King Jesus to the victorious because that's one of his names. And when we know Jesus, we're victorious in him.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is I was given that name years before I went into recovery. And when that name came to me, I really, like so much of my life, I thought, what? I don't get this, God, but I trust you. And so I just held on to it until the appropriate time. I guess you could consider it like a seed that had been planted and just needed to come to fruition.
I love that. And I love how God calls those things that are not as though they are. You know, he named Gideon a mighty warrior while Gideon was literally cowering in fear. And that is so powerful that God names us. And then we kind of step into that name where we would kind of do things the opposite. Like as soon as you've earned the right to be called victorious, then I will give you that name. No, but that's not how God does things. Yeah. That's so prophetic. And it's so beautiful. I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I see behind you up above that really cute shoe, that cute
which has a story in and of itself.
Awesome. The book, and I just read your book, and it's What's Your Scarlet Letter? Recognize Your Hurts, Release Your Shame, Reclaim Your Voice. And I know you've authored other books, but that's kind of the one I want to focus on today. It really resonated with me, Daphne, because from my story, I mean, my story is one of the 20 in here. I had a scarlet letter, literally, and I could definitely relate to that, whatever that thing is that causes you shame. And so we're going to kind of unpack that today. And you said it's a guide to recognize your hurt, release your shame, and reclaim your voice. Wow, that is powerful. That is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. So for me, part of my story, Michele, is, and I talk about it as openly as I can in the book. I was sexually assaulted by a non-family caregiver around age 7, and I repressed it. And as is true with many sexually assault victims, we repress that memory because we feel dirty, we feel shame. And until we recognize it, it holds power over us. One of the things I learned in recovery is that what we keep in the dark is what truly controls us. So when I finally decided to bring it into the light, I remember the first time I did an inventory on it, I knew it in my mind. I felt it in my DNA. I knew something had happened, but writing it out on paper made it more real.
Okay.
Because whenever we experience something traumatic, it's easy to say, well, maybe it wasn't as bad, to kind of diminish it or dismiss it or compare it, because all of the traumas that I had experienced throughout my life were nothing compared to what I saw on the big screen or the person who was making the headlines.
Right.
So I tended to diminish it or dismiss it or straight up deny. Yeah. And through my healing journey, I recognized that until I identified it, it was going to continue to control me. And I'm enough of a control freak that I said, heck no, all right. I'm in charge here. Well, God is, however.
Right, right. That's so good. And in the book, you talk about how we either bury our pains, our hurts, the things that happen to us, or we can partner with God to dig them out.
Yeah.
And that is not that is not an enjoyable process. It could actually be quite painful, but it produces amazing results because you and I both know that if you don't get to the root of the problem, it's not going away.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I actually have a process that I call
Yes.
clear your crap. And crap is an acronym. And it comes from understanding that as long as the roots, just like a weed in your yard, you
Right.
go out there with a weed eater all day and it's going
Mhm.
to come right back and it's going to come
Right.
right back and it's going to come right back. But when you take the time to get dirty, to
Right.
deal with the yuck and pull it
Mhm.
out by the roots, all those little tendrils and everything,
Yeah.
the chances of it coming back are slim to none. Now, there may always be a mark in your
Mhm.
yard, in your heart, in your mind. However, it no longer has that power to return.
Yes. You know, that mark can be compared to a scar, right? And one time when I was working with women who have overcome life controlling issues, or they were in that process, that journey that we're going to talk about today, God showed me a picture of a scar, right? We all have scars. We have physical scars and we have emotional scars that are a little harder to see, but they're there. Well, I can look at my scar and I can be reminded of the hurt, or I can look at the scar and I can be reminded of the healing. It really is about perspective. It's not going to go away, but how I look at it now is totally different now that I see things from God's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Just this morning, I did a Facebook post about strong
Mhm.
women aren't born, they're made. And
Yes,
we're made because of our traumas, the things that
absolutely.
happen to us. And surviving them is what makes us strong. It doesn't mean, and sometimes people confuse strength with toughness.
Mhm.
We're actually tender on the inside. We're
Right.
just protecting that because we've already been wounded once or
Sure.
twice or, many more times.
Absolutely. One of the things that you wrote in the book, Daphne, is you said when the pain of holding on is greater than the fear of letting go, you're ready to start healing. And I really feel like we have to be ready to take that journey with God because it's not always easy and it can be painful. But staying stuck isn't easy either. So it's like choose your heart, right? Choose your heart.
Exactly. Exactly. One of the phrases I use that I learned from our mutual acquaintance, how
Yes.
we connected,
Right.
is acute pain versus chronic pain.
Sure.
We can live with that pain for the rest of our lives. It almost becomes, because it's familiar, it
Mhm.
becomes almost comfortable.
Right.
We're used to it. We accept it.
Mhm.
However, once we make the decision, and I'll be honest, I made the decision several times before I made the final decision, right? We lay it
Right.
at the cross and we take it back. We lay
Oh
it at
yeah.
the cross and we take it back because
Yes.
God's not doing it fast enough. But
Yeah.
when I made that final decision that I did not care, I had nothing to lose
Mm.
except the pain. I got to the place where I thought, whatever lies ahead, it's got to be better than this.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided to fully release it.
That's so good. And I'm glad that you've put a voice to it, Daphne, because it's something that can cause us such shame that we don't want to talk about it. It's like that big sign that I used to wear with God, don't go there.
Yeah.
But I really had to be ready, like we've talked about earlier. But you and I both know that the root issue for a lot of bad fruit in our lives is that early childhood trauma, that sexual abuse. And I hate to say it, but I've interviewed many people who have endured that. And then later in life, they have problems with substances and problems with eating disorders and all that's all the bad fruit as a result of the root, which is the wound. And again, until we let God dig that out with us, partner with him, because he really is good at seeing roots we can't see, we're not going to get victory, and it's like we go into this mode of bad fruit management instead of dealing with the root. And when you deal with the root, or when you allow God to, guess what happens to everything attached to it? It dies.
Oh, absolutely. I know that incident, that season of trauma affected I dare say, the next 45 years of my life. So
Wow.
y'all don't do the math. Okay. Just don't even, if you're sitting there listening or watching, and you're like, oh, the math, don't do the math. But what happened was I accepted that shame and I let it define me.
Mm.
And I didn't understand I had the right to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And I sought, because I didn't understand,
Mm-hmm.
ways actually to reinforce what I believed. I mean, I don't want to say we all, let me just say this. I can justify just about anything.
Right.
In fact, I
Right.
did it for over 32 years in an unhealthy marriage.
Wow.
Well, I asked for that. Well, if I had only done this different, well, it won't happen again.
Right.
I was able to justify everything because of that initial root.
Wow.
And once I got healthy enough to truly begin healing,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I was able to set the boundaries and
Yeah.
say, enough,
Right.
and make the lasting changes for true healing, for
Yes.
true growth, to be able to say, I am complete exactly as I am,
Yes.
scars and all.
So good. That's so good. Well, I mean, 45 years. When you said that, Daphne, I think of people in this season in our culture who are trying to minimize pedophilia. I mean, let's just say it, okay? But trying to minimize it, trying to make it okay, trying to justify it. And here you are dealing with this for over 4 decades. It has affected your life massively. And I know so many people who are in the same situation. And I really think we need to share our stories so that people realize this is a serious problem. Children are not ready to be sexualized, to have perpetrators, grooming them and doing these things. So we need to take a stand, and we need to start pushing back and using our voices and our stories to say, hey, look, this is not okay. This is not okay.
Right. I think doing so, first of all, gives permission
Right.
for others to share. It encourages them to
Yes.
share. I can remember really hitting a brick wall with the book.
Mhm.
And I was driving. I mean, like, I can tell you right now what road where I was.
Wow.
And I was crying out to God, and I heard him say, this isn't your story. It's my story through you.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
Because it is his story of victory in my life.
Yeah.
And it's cliche because it's true. I thought, if this helps one woman, which is why I expanded my book. So my book isn't just about my abuse, which in my lifetime, I have had sexual, physical, emotional, and verbal abuse, all of it. However, I recognize that there are some women, praise God, on this planet who have no ability to relate to abuse.
Right.
However, they know about divorce. They know about adultery, abortion, adoption, body image issues, rejection, pornography addiction. And so I included stories of other women in my book who dealt with other scarlet letters, so that this would be applicable to women across the board.
Yeah, I really love that part of the book, Daphne, because you share those stories and then you revisit it through the book, and it's very relatable. I mean, anybody who reads it is going to be able to find something in there that will help her, or even for men as well.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because I have had men say, why do you focus on the women so much?
Right.
And I'm like, well, because I am one. But they themselves have these issues of recognizing their hurts, needing to release their shame and reclaim their voice. And one gentleman said, it helps me understand my wife better.
Oh, wow.
I can now better love her and give her the space and the empathy and the support that she needs, because in the moment, we can't always voice it.
Right.
And so if somebody else can relate and voice it on our behalf, and I've even recommended the book for people who are caregivers, as far as guardians, aunts, uncles, because you might recall, I talk a lot about grooming and what does grooming really look like.
Right.
So if somebody is an aunt or a grandparent, you know, raising children as a grandparent is different than when they raise their kids, because the world is different. And so how can they be equipped to look out and train their loved ones what signs to look for?
Yes, and that's very beneficial. You mentioned the different kinds of abuse you've endured over the years. And do you think it has to do with the fact that your voice was kind of taken at such a young age? And when your voice is taken at a young age, you allow these other forms of abuse to happen in your life, right?
Absolutely. Like I said, I didn't know it was okay to say no. I was raised in the South as a good Christian girl with manners. And, you know, when that first abuse happened, I was shocked. I didn't know, we didn't have stranger danger back then, right?
Yes.
I sure as heck didn't know what boundaries were at age 7. I don't think anyone even talked about boundaries back in the day. And so having that base, that foundation that was cracked and rocky and unstable, just like they talk about in the Bible, what are you building your house on?
Right.
Right. So I built my life on that until I recognized and I realized, wait a second, that does not have to define me and determine my choices moving forward.
Absolutely.
I can say this ends today. And what's interesting, you mentioned reclaiming my voice. So in high school, my mom was married to her second husband. And by then I had developed a little bit of an edge. And I used sarcasm as my normal way of communication.
Yep.
So I was given the nickname Mouth because I was mouthy.
Right.
I was doing it from a place of pain.
Yes.
And now what is so interesting is I can now do it from a place of calling. Speaking has always come, and speaking to groups has always been something easy for me.
Right.
You know, you read those statistics about
number
1 fear is death, number 2 is, I'm like, really?
Yeah, I know. Me too.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's how I knew it was a calling.
Right.
And so when I was able to get healthy and to get healed, I was able to put my voice to it. And now I can say, you know what? Yeah, the body of Christ, I'm a mouth. And that's okay.
That is okay. It's better than being the armpit. And I haven't met any armpits. Well, maybe I have, but we won't talk about it.
That's not for today.
No. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go through the steps that you talk about in the book, because it's just so good. And we need to remember that this is a journey. We are on a journey with God. And, you know, sometimes we take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, but we're in a process with him, and that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as we're continuing with God, we're going to get to our destination eventually. So the step 1 is recognize your hurt. Okay. And that's one of the things we kind of already talked a little bit about this, but instead of just burying it and numbing it and ignoring it, actually bringing it to light.
Yes. And so I've been in the recovery world for 12 years now. And part of the process of a true recovery program is to make amends. And it's sometimes with yourself.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I am not saying, so hear me loud and clear. If you were abused, number 1, it was not your fault.
Yes.
And number 2, you don't need to make amends with them. You do need to make amends with yourself, because sometimes we think we allowed it to happen. And sometimes we did to a degree, but most often it happened to us. Okay.
Right.
So part of the healing process, recognizing your hurts, is to get them out of your head and onto paper. That gives you the power to release it, because as long as it's in here, it is, as I mentioned, it's in the dark.
Sure.
So writing it down and finding a trusted source. It's often a trained professional. Sometimes it's a girlfriend. Like I have a girlfriend who's my vault girlfriend. She knows someday when I pass, exactly where my journals are and to come in and get them.
I need a vault, girlfriend. Note to self. That's good.
Yes. And I can trust her with anything. We then, from the paper, need to verbalize them. Because when it comes out of our mouth, it comes out of us. And then I recommend a nice, cozy little fire. Burn that stuff up, because once it turns to ashes, it can't be reconstructed.
Yes. And we know we serve a God who turns beauty from ashes, right? He brings beauty from ashes.
Yeah.
And, somebody may be listening to that right now and say, how could that possibly happen? When God gives you a promise, you don't have to figure out how he's going to do it. You just trust that you will. And you're really living proof of that, Daphne, because you've taken those ashes and now you're helping others. And that's just what God does. So there is beauty from it.
Absolutely.
The beauty from the healing. And I know with my situation, what happened to me brought me to Jesus. So that's like the ultimate bringing beauty from ashes, because there's nothing more beautiful than Jesus. So he can bring good out of these things. He didn't cause them to happen, but he is able to turn them around. And I'm living proof of that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's so good of just releasing it. And I remember the first time I actually gave my testimony in front of a group of women, and I just walked out of that place and I felt like I just had dropped 100-pound weight off of me. It just was so incredible. And I did it through many tears, and I was nervous, but it was incredibly freeing. But I had to be ready to do that because, like I said, I had a big "don't go there" sign. I buried it very deep. I'm like, I'm never talking about this. I'm never telling anybody. And yet here we are talking about our books where we share our deepest secrets. But again, when it comes into the light, it has no power over you anymore.
Exactly. And that's part of releasing our shame.
Right.
As long as we hold on to it, we are a prisoner to it.
Yes.
And that is definitely straight up enemy tactics 101.
Boom.
If he can get us to feel shame, then it immobilizes us. It strips away our power.
Right.
When God is not a God of condemnation.
No, he's
conviction,
not.
yes. And conviction is completely different than condemnation. I felt convicted to write the book. Did I want to write the book? Heck to the no. I didn't want to write the book. I didn't want all those people knowing all those things. However, as I, it set somebody else free. It has set several other people free. And I know you've had the same experience when somebody sends an email to you or posts a review. I remember the very first one I received, and she said, "Were you a fly on my wall? How did you know what I was going through?" I thought, okay, I did a good thing. I did a good thing. I was brave for someone else so that they could be brave. And
I love that.
Then that shame is released. We don't have to carry, we don't have to be defined by it any longer.
Absolutely. Well, our great grandparents, Adam and Eve, did hide after they sinned. They did hide. They tried to cover themselves because for the first time they realized they were naked. They didn't notice it before. So this is shame. And that's what we do. We try to cover ourselves. We try to hide from God. And we need to realize that he already knows it. And he has a plan to bring us out of it. He loves us and he wants to set us free.
Absolutely. Perfect love casts out fear.
Yes.
And when we are truly free, when we are living in his love, then we don't have anything to be afraid of. We can truly step into his power within us.
Beautiful. I love it. Okay. So then the next part is healing your hurt. And that's what we talked about earlier. Where do you bury it, numb it, try to hide it, or do you dig? And digging is not fun. But again, when you partner with God and you have him on that journey, and when these things come up and they're incredibly painful, maybe a painful memory or just a different situation, or maybe something that we did that we're ashamed of, whatever the case may be, when you have him with you, he heals as you go. He brings healing as these things are dug up. So you talked about the process of journaling, and one of the things, you quoted Jeremiah when I read this part of the book. You said you can't heal a wound by saying it's not there, right? Saying it's not there, denying it, living in denial. Oh, wow, that's a big one. Living in denial, pretending everything's okay, or pretending certain things didn't happen. That is super toxic and doesn't lead us into freedom at all.
Exactly. It keeps us imprisoned. And one of the things I like to say is you have to feel it to heal it. Then you can deal with it and be real with it.
That's good.
So keeping it stuffed, it's just like a splinter.
Right.
And it will fester and it becomes poison and we become toxic for ourselves and to others. It's just a no-win situation.
It is.
Holding on to it doesn't do anybody any good.
Right.
And there are ways, because I know I had this little, I call it a divine download. There's somebody who's watching this, listening to this, who's going to say, yeah, but my perpetrator is still alive, or I'm related to them. And to that, I say, I'm sorry. And that doesn't mean you still have to hold on to it. Right. There are ways to let it go without bringing family disgrace.
Right.
They know what they've done. Right?
Right.
So when you take the time to do the work to release them, just like they say, forgiveness is for for me, is for the forgiver, right? Forgiveness is for the forgiver. Yes. And I can, by the grace only and strength of God alone, I can forgive. Doesn't mean I'm going to forget.
Right.
So when they're around that person again, you have the boundaries, you have the safeguards. But holding on to that shame, that's poisoning yourself.
Right. That's so good. I interviewed somebody who was molested by her own father, and it was a very difficult situation, but God gave her, because, you know, we always say, well, if there's a loving God, how would he allow that to happen? Right. I mean, you've heard it, you've probably said it, I've heard it, and I've said it. But she got a kind of a download from God about how it broke his heart to see this, to see somebody that he had set in her life to protect her being the one who was abusing her. And yet for all of those people who are abused, even on this day, Daphne, God sees it. His heart is broken over it, but he has given us free will. Absolutely. And sometimes the free will of other people wounds us.
Exactly. Exactly. And one of the things, like you just said, he was there with me every step of the way. He is there with you. He's there with whoever's seeing this and hearing this. And he is weeping and he is protecting you, which sounds kind of crazy, from something even worse happening, right? There could be even a greater perpetration if God weren't right there. And I know for many, many, many years of my life, we'll just say too many, I knew God was present in my life. However, I ran my race. I lived my life like it was a relay race. I'd get an idea or a word from God. I'd say, thank you. I'd grab that baton and I would take off. And then I would become exhausted and I'd go back to him. One day I got this idea from God. I saw this picture of he and I living life, running the race like it's a three-legged race.
Wow.
Where he is, a three-legged,
right.
You're bound together. And if you step out, you're going to fall down. Right. And so for me, when I live a three-legged race, when I live life as a three-legged race, then I'm more aware of his presence. And something I recently realized was that it's hard to run ahead of God when I'm down on my knees.
That's good. That's
when I'm on my knees connecting with him.
Yes.
I don't have to worry about where is he. I know exactly where he is.
I love that. That's so good. All right. Well, let's talk about releasing your shame, because that's a biggie. And I know when God broke the shame off of me, it was a total game changer. And that's when I was really able to start sharing my story, when the shame was gone and I realized that even though I made choices along the way that I was a victim too, but I didn't want to have that victim mindset. I wanted to be victorious, right?
Yeah.
Victorious like Jesus is. So one of the things you talk about in the book, Daphne, is two types of shame, healthy and unhealthy. If you could take a moment to talk about that, because I never really considered shame to be healthy or that it could be.
Right, right. So here's where the concept stems from. And there are some people who will debate this, and that's great. I think when we debate, we then learn. Okay.
Right.
So healthy shame is the kind of shame where you feel condemned, where you feel bad.
Right.
Okay. When you start to think less of yourself and you tend to withdraw, that is unhealthy shame. Healthy shame is what we run into when we do something wrong and we learn from it and we don't repeat it. It prevents us from repeating it. So in your book, I mean, I'm not saying anything that you haven't shared publicly, right? I mean, you had an affair and you had a child.
Right.
Now, you learned the lesson from that.
Yes.
You've gleaned, you've grown. Now, if you continue to do that,
right,
that's going to be that unhealthy shame.
Sure.
But you learned from it. So you said, okay, absolutely. I've got the lesson. And now that's not going to happen again.
Right.
But in cases of abuse, it gets twisted. And we think we had a choice. And so that's why I shared earlier, if you've been abused, it is never, ever, ever your fault. You know, I didn't watch it last night, but I have been on social media today. So evidently there was a thing at the awards.
Right.
And so people were justifying that. I'm here to tell you that was physical abuse. First, there was verbal abuse, not justified. Secondly, there was physical abuse. There is never, ever, ever an excuse for any type of abuse. And that's one of the things I define in my book. What is abuse? Because I think that leads a lot of times to bearing the hurt and owning the shame, is because we don't fully understand that abuse is misuse with an intent to harm. That's a simple definition of it.
Right. That's good.
And both of those people intended harm in some way.
Yes.
But one does not cancel out the other, and one does not justify the other. There is always an alternative. It's called walking away.
Right.
In those
That's
situations.
what we teach our kids. You know, we teach our kids these things, right? When somebody punches another kid on the playground, you say, why did you do that? Well, he called me a name or whatever. Like, I'm justified to hit him because he said this to me. And so these people who are supposedly role models and things like that doing it, it's just, it's not a good situation. But as you were talking about the healthy and unhealthy kinds of shame, Daphne, I was thinking about this. There's a verse in Corinthians, and I don't have it memorized, but it says that godly sorrow leads to repentance, but earthly sorrow leads to death. And that is something that I really experienced. Like, I experienced godly sorrow over what I had done when my eyes were open to what I had actually done. And that led to repentance. Like you said, I don't want to do that anymore. I see the destruction and the pain, and it's taken years to walk through, but I have an amazing child and I have a relationship with Jesus, and I have now a platform to talk about these things with people. Okay. Because most people have something that they're dealing with. And, but then the worldly sorrow leads to death. Right. And so it can kind of be associated with shame, because if you don't let God redeem it, it's going to destroy your life. It really is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I actually got to the point in my life where I was starting to experience the physical manifestations of my shame, of my stress. And that was maybe one of the biggest turning points for me. It's like, whoa, wait a second. Not only have I given away my power, it is now turning inward, and I'm experiencing these health issues. No, but we all have to draw our own line when we're ready.
Yes, that's the key, when we're ready. And I'll read the quote that I mentioned earlier. When the pain of holding on is greater than the fear of letting go, you're ready to start healing.
Yeah. Exactly.
So good. Okay. Yeah, you talked about conviction versus condemnation. And when we're convicted, we're able to say, I don't want to do that again. We can apologize, we can make amends. But when we're in condemnation, it's just like perpetually beating yourself up, constantly crawling on broken glass. But yet God's word says that there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So God has taken those sins from us. There's no condemnation, there is freedom, but we learn the lesson. And sometimes the consequences remain, and we need to partner with God to deal with that. Obviously, that was the case for me. I had a child. So yeah, and I just feel like so many Christians are just kind of wallowing in the mess, marinating in it, so to speak. And like you said, it does manifest in our bodies physically.
Yeah, y'all, let me just say this. I had a counselor tell me one time, Daphne, staying in an abusive situation is not bringing honor and glory to God.
Wow.
And then I followed up with my little snarkiness is, you know what? The book of martyrs is complete, and most likely your name isn't in it. So stop it. Quit being a martyr. I mean, how's that, to quote Dr. Phil, how's that working for you?
Exactly.
And to a degree, and this may sound harsh, but I'm a little salty. To a degree, it is working for you, or you wouldn't keep hanging on to it.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Okay. So one of the things that you talked about in the book is exposing the lies. So, we believe these lies, and especially if things that happen to us as children, like one of the big lies is it's my fault, or it was your fault, and things like that. So I feel like the best way to expose the lies, I mean, let's face it, if we knew they were lies, we'd toss them out, but we believe them to be truth, right? And the enemy is very sneaky and get us to come into agreement with him. But for me, just knowing Jesus, and because Jesus is truth, his word is truth. So as you start like diving into the Bible, and he talks about how much he values you, and that I'm holy and blameless in his sight. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm holy and blameless in God's sight. I mean, I wasn't holy and blameless in my sight at all.
Sure.
And that was a lie I believed. But then when I saw God's truth of it, and you know how God sometimes just highlights it and it just kind of leaps off the page. It's like, wow, I am holy and blameless in his sight. So if that's what he says, maybe I should come into agreement with what he's saying over me.
Right. Exactly. And I tell people, look, if he forgave you, why aren't you forgiving yourself? Are you more powerful than God? Are you better than God? Do you know better than God? I don't think so, sister. He is the perfect one. Right. He is all knowing. And even as a firstborn from a highly dysfunctional family, thinking I was all knowing, I've come to realize I'm not. And I choose to trust him and his word. It certainly serves me better than all that garbage I was believing beforehand.
Absolutely. That's so good. I love that. Well, I'm a firstborn too, so high five on that. All right. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, Daphne, I love this quote from the book, and I have highlighted several of them, but you wrote, "Don't judge yourself by your past. You don't live there anymore." And for me, like, I was super tied to the past, right? Because of what happened, and I had raising this child and everything. But understanding that we really are a new creation in Christ. The old has gone, the new has come. And in you and I are both coaches, and I'm in ministry as well. And you always hear, well, you don't know what I've done, right? You don't know what I've done. And I don't, but I know what God's done. And I know what Jesus has done for us on our behalf. And one of the things that I thought was kind of a coincidence is you mentioned the story of Gomer. And I mentioned that in my book as well, because Gomer cheated on her husband, cheated on Hosea, the prophet, and had children outside of that relationship. And I was just like, wow, that really rocked me. And yet Hosea is a picture of Jesus constantly taking her back. And he takes her back until she kind of realizes, here's where I'm loved. Here's where I'm valued. I'm sure she believes some lies about herself as well. And yet Hosea, representing a type of Jesus, even bought her back from slavery. That is incredibly powerful.
It is. It is. And so an image that just came to my mind as I was listening to you, Michele, is, first of all, 2 Corinthians 5:17. That's my life verse, right?
Yeah. Amen.
And when I recognized new creation, not renewed, not recycled, not remodeled, like completely new.
Yes.
The image I had just now was, so last year I moved. Okay. Divorced after 32 years of marriage, sold the dream home.
Wow.
And bought my very first own home on my own, cute little townhome. I love it.
Yes.
This is where I am today. This is who I am today. If I got in my car, went to the grocery store, and decided to head back home and went to my old address, those people would be like, what, are you crazy? You don't live here anymore.
Yeah.
This isn't where you belong.
Right.
Once we decide to accept God's healing power and become new, we don't live there anymore.
Right.
Now, it's going to be tempting, just like when you move, it's like, oh, whoops, I'm going the wrong direction.
Yes.
But the faster you get back on course,
right,
that's the healthier and stronger you are. So when we make that decision to get healed, to come clean, to set down the scarlet letter, give yourself the grace that God gives you. It's not going to be perfect from day one. You are living in that bondage and with those lies for how long?
Yeah.
It may take a day or two for you to adapt to the newness. Just embrace it and be patient with yourself.
That's so good. And when you connect with God on the journey, you know, God knows us more than we know ourselves, and he knows exactly what we need. And what you need and what I need may be different. Maybe the person watching may be different. So he doesn't treat us all the same, just like those of us with more than one child. We don't treat our children the same, right? He knows our personality, knows what we've been through, and having God on the journey is incredible. One little tip that I really liked before we wrap up here is you talk about inserting your name in scripture. And I think you can even buy a Bible and have your name put in there. Like in I love you with an everlasting love, right? When you read that, I love you with an everlasting love, say, I love Michele with an everlasting love. Like that makes it so personal. And it's just so beautiful. It's like God speaking to you. That was such a cool little thing. I love that you put that in there. Well, Daphne, there are so many things that we could still talk about, but I'm going to recommend that everybody read the book because, like you said, even if somebody hasn't endured some form of abuse, you can understand people better, and even husbands understanding maybe some certain things that their wives have gone through. That's incredibly powerful. But is there anything else that you'd like to add today?
I just want to encourage everyone. If you are still breathing, there is still hope. It doesn't matter if it happened yesterday or 50 years ago. There is still hope for healing. Trust in God, trust his word, and seek those who've gone before you. We have spoken out for a reason. As I say in Esther, for such time as this. Amen. There's going to be somebody right now who needs that hope. And that is my desire. It's to be that light in the darkness, to help women break chains so that they can make waves with their future and not, just to kind of bring this full circle, continue to live stuck, because stuck is yuck and it stinks. It is. Amen. Amen. That's so good. Well, Daphne, it's really been a pleasure to talk with you today. I really appreciate your honesty and your transparency and sharing your story. And I will let everybody know how to get a hold of you. You're a coach, you're an author, you're a mover and shaker, breaking the chains and making waves. That should be on a t-shirt. I love that. There you go. It's so good. So thank you so much for being our guest today. Michele, thank you. I appreciate it. And I want to thank our audience for watching this episode of Voices of Recovery. We're creating a safe place where people can go on their journey with God. If you're new, give us a like or follow, and please share this message out, because I'm sure there's somebody you know who needs to hear what Daphne had to say today. So God bless you, Daphne. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Voices of Recovery. Bye-bye.